their hands, and thus it is also difficult to digitize those transactions. We all gathered here because we want more and more women to be financially included. And for that agenda, we can't ignore the women involved in agriculture, but we are interested in finding out ways of reaching out to those women, identifying what roles are they involved in, identifying what are their financial needs, and then working with the appropriate set of partners from the commercial side, from the nonprofit side, in order to meet the financial needs of these women. To address this important topic, I'm joined by an esteemed group of panelists today. So thank you to all of you for making the time. I'll do a quick round of introductions in no particular order. So we are joined by Mr. Umair Ahmed, who is a Senior Joint Director at the Agricultural Credit and Financial Inclusion Department of the State Bank of Pakistan. We also have Ms. Aisha Gulzar, who's the Chief Operating Officer at the Agribusiness Support Fund. We have Ms. Samina Nazir, who is President and CEO at PODA, and she's the founder for Alliance for Rural Women Leadership. And last but not least, we have Mr. Rameez Kauri, who is the Senior Program Officer at Better Cotton. So without wasting any more time, we just dive straight into the discussion. So I think I'll start with Ms. Samina Nazir, who is heading PODA right now. So, Madam, I'd like to understand, for one, the kind of work that PODA has been doing, the kind of interventions you have been undertaking. What sort of experiences have you had with women farmers? What have you observed about the roles that they perform in different parts of the country, in different crops, etc.? And have you come across any financial needs of these women that are unmet? So, over to you, Madam. And sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you for organizing this very important and timely webinar. As you know, the national budget in Pakistan has just come, and there was a lot of mention of agriculture and stuff, but I didn't see much on rural women, although we had sent recommendations to the Planning Commission of Pakistan to include specific facilities for women. So our organization PODA started working in rural areas of Pakistan in 2003, and we primarily work with the rural women and their communities to promote and protect women's rights in rural areas of Pakistan. And in that, our first initiative is to identify women farmers who are doing innovative work and who have found local solutions for problems, and who are leaders in their communities. And through them, we first understand the problems of local agriculture, and then we see what needs to be done in terms of bridging the gap of information or techniques or tools, or linking them with resources. So we have worked on various issues, such as developing seed banks for women farmers in areas where women were not able to find good quality seeds. We have also organized technical trainings on rainwater harvesting and tunnel farming and drip irrigation. We have also worked with the veterinary university to introduce the whole family livestock responsibilities, so the burden of work does not only fall on the women. And we have also conducted training on climate smart kitchen gardening, so that women are able to improve the local food security, and are also able to understand the changes of the climate and develop resilient strategies. In that context, most recently, we have taught women farmers how to set up weather stations where they can, where they are connected with the radar, and they can get a daily update of rain within the 15-kilometer radius. Linked to all that, we also help women to start organic fruit farms so that they can first improve their own nutrition with vitamin C intake and understand what vegetables are useful for common problems of women like anemia, that is very common in our rural areas, and also make byproducts to improve their income. And linked to all that is amplifying the voices of rural women, because women farmers are doing all this innovative work and most people don't know about it. So in that context, we organize an annual conference of rural women every year on 15th October, which is the International Day of Rural Women. And we highlight the achievements, the challenges, the solution strategies of rural women. And I invite all of you to join our Rural Women Conference in October 2023. So I'll take a stop here and then maybe we can come back to it, or if you have any comments or questions, I'm happy to take it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the introduction was very helpful, and you rightly pointed out that the budget is only focused on the needs of half of the population, which is the male population. And of course, when you talk about women in agriculture, then there are pertinent issues surrounding climate change, which affects women disproportionately, and also nutrition. Again, the nutrition needs of women are also often unmet. Would you like to comment about the financial needs? Do you think they're being met, or what sort of financial needs do these women have? So are you still on mute?
Women's financial needs, of course, are multiple, and they're not addressed from a gender perspective. So most women farmers, for example, don't have access to bank accounts. They don't know how to take advantage of the agricultural subsidies and agricultural loans. They don't know how to participate in the government's tractor schemes or other things. And the biggest obstacle that women have is collateral and showing that they are owners of land. And as you know, in most areas, women may spend their whole life working on a land, but they will never become owners of that because of the problems with the inheritance system and joint family agriculture, and the fact that women get married and go away and the sons stay in the family, so the land doesn't get divided. So the cultural, traditional, and legal, legal obstacles actually are much easy now. The government has made a lot of steps to make women's inheritance more easy, women's property rights. If a woman decides to take her property share, it is actually now legally less complicated and more easily accessible, but there are cultural pressures that stop women from taking the inheritance and property because the family ostracizes them for taking their land. In terms of financial, when we started, most women didn't have, when we started 20 years ago, most women didn't have CNIC, didn't think they need a CNIC. It became a bit popular with the Benazir Income Support Program.
Yeah.
But now that obstacle is not as serious. Most women do have CNIC now, but their banks have also started some schemes, Khoshali Bank and other banks. But now I think that women's real access to financial services, particularly small landholder women, women living in isolated rural areas, still don't know how to work with the bank system, don't have collateral or startup money, and don't have resources, tools, or techniques to take advantage of tractor schemes or other. Access to market remains a serious problem for women in rural areas. They work, they produce, they harvest, But when it comes to go and sell it and keep the money, that again is difficult for women. So there need to work on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it makes sense. They are unable to receive and retain the incomes they've earned. And also you likely pointed out that they remain unaware of whatever developments are happening on the regulatory side, on the policy side. They are unable to take advantage of those because of the cultural norms. So on that note, I'd like to move on to Ms. Aisha Gulzar. So, Madam, you come with a lot of rich experience in working with women and with farmers in general. So just briefly, what sort of interventions have you been able to undertake to increase incomes and productivities for women farmers? And also during these experiences, what sort of financial needs of these women were you able to discover?
Thank you very much, Anand. So I think Ms. Nazir has covered, very succinctly a gendered rights-based approach to women in agriculture. So the Agribusiness Support Fund, ASF, was primarily set up, by the Federal Ministry of National Food, Agriculture and Livestock at that point in time in 2005 to bring in an agribusiness approach, particularly for smallholder farmers. So since then, what we've seen is that when programs are designed or when policy is made, there is no specific mention of a gendered policy or the gendered dialogue within agriculture, even though everybody acknowledges that the majority of the informal work is done by women. So what we've tried to do is that, within our programs, we not only reach out to the women farmers, but we try to do it through the gatekeepers, who are generally the men of the family, of the community. So we try to have a holistic program whereby we are reaching out to these women and for these women, but through their gatekeepers. So what we've seen is that, when we're working on capacity building initiatives, we try to have an inclusive approach. Thereby we try to bring in, the main members of the family, the man and the woman, the parent and the daughter, the brother and the sister. And we try to bring them in to be able to create awareness about the roles of women and their contribution, and to try to get some sort of acknowledgement. What are some of the interventions that we've worked in and that we've seen success on, moving away from the major crops where women are working, but they're primarily working either on the post-harvest side or on the picking side or something like that. So we've tried to bring in an element of working on horticulture crops or high value and off-season vegetables, orchard crops, things like that, which are more accessible and where the women have more control over the entire process, because the crop cycle is shorter and it's more engaging for them to be working throughout the entire production cycle rather than just at one particular end of it. So we've done a lot of capacity building programs across Pakistan, all the way from the north down to Sindh. We've done a lot of awareness raising programs. We've done a lot of asset transfer programs. So these assets would primarily be in the form of either maybe a tunnel, whereby they're able to improve their incremental income by going into off-season vegetable farming. This can be in the form of a poultry package, which helps bring about an incremental income increase within their family income streams. It could be in the form of animal transfer, animal asset transfer, which is generally a smaller animal because women are the primary owners of these assets, and they're primarily responsible for the income that comes through them. So even though it's something which a trade which is happening at a local level, but this is something that they engage in. Another thing that we've experienced is that when we go into any community, particularly a rural farming community, we try to identify or work with those community women leaders, who are more progressive, who are a little more vocal, who have more support of their family, and try to set them up as lead farmers within the community. And they then thereby become the ambassadors of the information and awareness that we would like to get out to the community. This can be, like Ms. Samina said, it can be improved farming practices, it could be access to knowledge, Access to inputs is one of the greatest challenges that is faced by rural farmers, not only women, but in general rural farmers. The landscape in Punjab is very different from the landscape in the other provinces. I mean, even if you just go across the border to KP, even the smallholder rural men farmers will not have access to improved quality input, let alone the women. So thereby, we try, that's what I'm saying. That's why we try to work with a holistic approach, because if we go through the gatekeepers, we're then able to access the women with support of their men. What are some of the other things that we've done? What we've experienced is that, if we do some exposure learning immersive trips of farmers from different regions to the more progressive regions within their crops, for example, if we're working, on high value off-season vegetable, if we bring in the women who are working on, capsicum, on tomato, on cucumber, in the rural areas in KP or in Sindh or even in GB, and we bring them for exposure visits to Punjab and engage with our lead farmers here. It's speaking in their own language, seeing their own, practices being placed in actuality. It's the learning by doing experience is a lot more enriching than just a theoretical experience. So we try to have, engage through farmer field schools, which are then again housed within these model farms that we work with in the local community through the progressive farmers. What are some of the access to finance needs? Generally, what a smallholder farmer is looking for is access to working capital at the right time within their cropping cycle. So there are generally two peaks within a shorter cropping cycle of about 4 to 5 months when they're looking for inputs. One is at the beginning when they're getting ready, when they have sown their crop, and when they're at the when they have to purchase the seed and the fertilizer and all of that to go into the initial sowing. Then the second peak comes when they are primarily midway, when they have to go in for the weedicide, pesticide, and additional nutrition along with the irrigation. So these are the two main phases through which, at which they need access to finance. This is generally where the middleman comes in. And, so short of sounding cliched, we don't necessarily say that the role of the middleman is that of a villain. In fact, we should be moving towards trying to institutionalize the role of the middleman, because primarily he, but in some cases a she as well, is the one who is the risk taker for these farmers and on behalf of these farmers. So, that intermediary is playing an extremely important role, not just by providing a channel for the finance, but also for providing an upward channel back for marketing. So, that this person has very strong, roots within the community. So this is the kind of intermediary that we would like to be working with, that we would like to improve upon. And with the right kind of support, not necessarily just training, but with linkages and with networking and, with providing some sort of risk-taking, some cover for risk-taking, we see that this plays a much more important and impactful role for rural farmers. So I think I'll stop there and open for any comments and questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for those valuable comments. And I think, that's the difference between agriculture insiders and outsiders. So the people who work at the grassroots level understand that the middleman is playing such a crucial role in providing finance and providing access to markets, in addressing transportation, distribution, logistic needs. Removing that intermediary would not be the most efficient and effective thing to do. So that's a valuable actor that we need to partner with. And also, thanks for pointing out the differences between the different regions, how things in KP are different, how women are more empowered in Gilgit-Baltistan. And of course, it's hard to empower women in the conventional crops, but if you focus on off-season vegetables, on other high-value crops, then that is an area where we can do more to empower women and to address their financial needs as well. And also need male champions to bring about this change. and we don't want the men on the call to be feeling excluded. So for one, I do see questions popping up as well. So thank you for that. We'll come back to the questions towards the end of the discussion. And on that note, I'd like to move on to Mr. Ramesh Gauri from BCI. Ramesh, in light of the research studies undertaken by BCI, what have you observed about the roles performed by women and how are incomes distributed within the household, how empowered are women in making different sorts of decisions? And do we know anything about their financial behavior? Are they involved in like savings, investments, purchasing decisions? And are there any actors that can be useful for addressing the financial needs of these women?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Evan, for the early comments. I'm going to quickly add a couple of lines about Better Cotton so that you're aware of what we're doing and then move on to the question. So basically, Better Cotton is working in both Punjab and South Punjab primarily and Sindh. We have about 6-8 implementing partners now actually. We're working with about 350,000 smallholder and medium farmers. Our mission is to improve their incomes through reduction inputs primarily. So they have improved cotton basically. Along with that, as part of our 2030 strategy, it's a global strategy. Women empowerment is one of our goals basically of the strategy, where we plan to, and on a global level, we involve maybe almost 1 million women in farming. At a country level in Pakistan, the idea is to improve the ratio of just not. We are starting off with our partners, like the number of female staff and partners. We've been training them on gender, particularly more over the last couple of years. That training cascades down to farmers. And we're also trying to improve the number of female farmers. When coming down to Amna's question, women play a very important part, as Aisha also said, in the production of cotton, among other crops. They're involved in a lot of processes, including sewing and a lot of other things, which goes not just unnoticed, but doesn't get acknowledged. It's the men who are in control of all the decisions based, so that they're not decision makers despite their role, despite their efforts, and they're expected to do a lot more other than this part also. Secondly, they're not, so that's why they're not the focal persons in most cases. So they're not they don't have access to capacity building activities or market linkages. No information flows through them. So as an example, even though we've been trying a lot to improve these numbers, we currently have about 700 female farmers out of 350,000 female farmers, overall farmers. It's something, because the culture barriers, that will take a lot of time. It's not, despite all our efforts. So the distribution, like I said, the financial distribution is also very unequal. Despite their role, they did not have any access to finance or any decision making in terms of their children's school and health and yeah. However, what we've noticed is that through different stories, through case studies over the years, that women been given the chance. So we have a number of case studies where women were, women farmers was empowered, given the decision, the authority to make decisions, and given the finances, and they've tended to perform, they've outperformed their male counterparts, we would say. They managed to save more, they managed to produce more income for their family, and invested that at a later stage. We've been using those examples so far to promote, among other things, to promote this. But like I said, because of culture barriers, particularly more in Sindh compared to maybe Punjab, it's a slow process. So yeah, there are examples on our website also. I mean, I can maybe talk about that later also. But what we've been doing, so like Ms. Aisha said, that it's not possible for us to work with other crops, because cotton farmers, usually their land is used for wheat in the other part of the season. But so our focus has been through our partners to work on livelihoods for those women through other sources. For example, our partners are working with other organizations, local NGOs, microfinance institutions, and then they're using some of our funds to set up small livelihood options for women, including those related to textiles and knitting. Then there are micro nurseries. There's a lot of work including these, and like some other options, which even small shops for women, which have provided an additional source of income. Given that as the role in farms will take a lot of time to, I would say, improve, there's too many culture barriers for that for an overnight change. We focus on activities other than this to improve their livelihood, so that they have some sort of financial power. They contribute a bit financially, and that sort of empowers them also. So that's what we've been doing. That's how we've been working through our partners. In a lot of cases, they're getting inputs as well as loans from our partners and other organizations that they're connected to. I'm talking about Better Cotton farmers, families, the women involved, and they've been setting up their own businesses. So that's how we've been playing our role, and based on what on the situation, on the on-ground situation.
Sounds very nice. And yeah, I mean, you guys definitely work in a very difficult part of the country, which is Sindh, where women and even men have very little decision-making power in comparison to the landlords. So the tenant farmers don't have much power, and women do tend to work from sunrise to sunset on those farms. But as you rightly mentioned, I don't have decision-making power, don't have control over finances as well. But they are involved in different tasks on the farm, which might be unacknowledged. And that's a substantial the overall that we have to deal with. So we, yeah, just go over to State Bank now. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, this is one last thing that I said on addition, and one very important thing that Aisha mentioned. Every single step that we have to take the men on board. It is not possible whether it's Punjab or Sindh without their validation, if that's the right word, without their support. So that has been an essential part of our project. So it depends on the areas where the men are on board and are willing. Even for our field staff, actually, women, some of them had difficulties, so we've been helping them out also by discussing with their families how that will benefit, and farmers, and even pick cotton workers also. So when the agenda is on board and they're helpful, that's the only place when we need male champions of change in our sector also. That's pretty important.
No, completely agreed. I think if you're trying to bring about any change in the rural areas, you have to involve the household, get the men on board as well, maybe also get approval from the mother-in-law and other family members.
Exactly.
And you can't go against the established norms and cultural practices, so you have to keep them in mind while designing interventions. So yeah, now I'd like to move on to Mr. Umair Ahmed from State Bank. So the State Bank does assign targets for agricultural lending, for lending towards women as well. So, sir, I'd like to understand, have these targets changed after the banking inequality policy came about, or were women already focused in the previous targets as well? And I know it hasn't been a lot of time, but what do the initial results show? Which banks are performing better? Are there any different categories of banks that have been able to achieve these targets more easily? And yeah, have you noticed any trends so far from the data that you've been getting?
First of all, thank you, Amna, for taking me on board on this important discussion. And I would like to thank PFN and Karan Das for holding this session. Regarding your question, before that, I would like to give you a overview of how SPP is looking the agenda of financial inclusion in Pakistan and what we are doing. And then I will come back to your question that under banking and equality policy, what we are doing to improve the level of financial inclusion of women in all sectors and specifically in agriculture sector. So let me allow to share with you that SBP launched the National Financial Inclusion Strategy in 2015 and then its extended version in 2018. The purpose of this financial inclusion strategy is to create a inclusive financial ecosystem in Pakistan that would allow anybody in the country to access and use financial services, a range of financial services, I must say, with dignity and fairness. Under this banking national financial strategy, promoting agriculture finance is one of the important area. And under this initiative, we have launched various activities, various initiatives, which include land record digitization, which include electronic warehouse receipt financing, which include value chain financing, which include Islamic agriculture financing, and lastly and most importantly, the Kisan Digital Portal to allow farmers to register themselves for accessing the formal financial services from the banks. But although all these we can say that initiatives helped us to improve the level of financial inclusion in the country and improve the level of agriculture finance in the country. If I may share with you the numbers, in last around 7 or 8 years, we have improving the level of agriculture credit disbursement from 500 billion to 1.5 trillion. And now the government has set a target of 2.2 billion in the recent budget. So SBP is fully cognizant of this important sector, and we are taking initiatives. Now, the issue is that all these initiatives, although they help us to increase the level of financial inclusion in the country, but they did not target the growing gender gap in financial inclusion. For that reason, in 2021, State Bank of Pakistan actually launched its gender mainstreaming policy called Banking on Equality, which its Urdu narration Barabari par Bankari. So basically, the banking on equality policy aims to embed a gender lens in the financial sector approaches so they can uh, bring a shift in their policy making, in their product designing, in their customer facilitation approaches, in even in collection of gender disaggregated data. So all these initiatives have been developed under this banking on equality policy, and we have also set specific targets for not only for agriculture sector, for SME and microfinance sector. Now, coming back to the agriculture sector, we have set a target on the basis of a benchmark that we have set on the numbers of December 2021. And we are aiming to improve this number or making this number double within a period of 3 years. And we want to improve the level of financial inclusion of women and access to finance in agriculture of women to around 800 clients. So this is our objective there in terms of implementation. If you allow me, during the last 1 year of banking on equality implementation that was launched in September 2021, and its implementation was started in January 2021. Basically, we set the targets to the banks. We have advised banks to uh, 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 create a gender diversity within their different tiers of their management to bring a women focus in their policies, in their product designing, as I already mentioned. So as a result, we have improved the level of women in the workforce of the financial institution to from 13.1% to 14.5% right now. And it also helps us to bring the women champions in all the bank branches, all the touch points of the bank branches, where we want to have 75% of these touch points to be have a women champions. So right now we have around 45% of these branches have a female champions. One thing I would like to mention here that these female champions are not only are specific towards the women, but a male can also be a champion to provide financial services and provide information to the women clients that have approached to the bank branch for availing their financial for availing. In terms of monitoring, I would like to hear that we have a three-tier strategy to monitor these targets. And first of all, we have a
I'm just waiting for Umair to be back online, but
G, I think he has a connectivity problem right now.
yeah, I think we can come back to him then. And but I think he mentioned some very pertinent issues. So there's the theme of male champions, which is being echoed again and again, and also a lack of awareness as well, which Ms. Samina Nazir also pointed out earlier on. And also Mr. Umair mentioned of all of the wonderful initiatives that are being rolled out, but women remain unaware of those. Ramesh, I'd like to hear from you on the solution side that the goal is to digitize payments received by women so that they can serve as a vehicle for financial inclusion. In your opinion, is that a feasible solution, or do we need to look elsewhere? And what sort of partners do we need to bring about that kind of inclusion? And what sort of entry points are possible that we can look at to
Yeah, Selena, thank you. So in terms of, I'll be talking strictly in terms of the cotton sector. The two women are involved in two different scenarios. We talked about women farmers and their role and how their role doesn't get acknowledged. We also have cotton pickers, who Aisha mentioned earlier. Basically, women are the primary cotton pickers. They're involved. They are preferred over men for cotton picking. And their role, I mean, I think we had an earlier discussion on this also. So women, some of them are migrant workers, some of them in the case of Sindh, actually. With Punjab, they're mostly either from the same village or some adjoining village or Tehsil. The issues that we might face with transactions with cotton pickers is that a lot of them don't have access to phones, don't own mobile phones, for example. And the transaction involving them is in yearly, like it's once in a year, basically. They'll be coming for picking, so their preferred mode is cash, basically. Even though the most amount of women involved within the cotton sector are women pickers. Farmers are a very small sector, but given their conditions, and this is a tricky part to work with, we need a lot of improvement. But despite that, it's the areas in Punjab, maybe Bhagalpur and Bhavanagar, where we can work to promote this. And what we can do maybe is that working with the organizations, that we can look at where else they're working other than cotton picking. So the other parts, so maybe we can add those transactions, improve by maybe provision of phones for them. And then apart from this transaction of cotton picking, we can look at where their other work is and where they can use this in the other part of work. But what would be even more feasible would be to work with the farmers that we mentioned earlier, the farming families, who've been given livelihood options through our partners. Both livelihoods, some have been set up businesses, some of them have been given loans to work with. So there, for someone who's, for example, running a shop or a small knitting or textile work sort of business, they have daily transactions. So even though they would be, instead of calling them a farmer, it'd be a farming, basically a co-farmer, or farming family or farming community would be the right word for them. But they have a lot of transactions going on a daily or monthly basis in terms of buying, in terms of selling their produce products to different people. So those are the entry points that at least within Better Cotton's partners that we can work with. And most of our partners are working in different forms. Like I mentioned, also self-help groups where this can be introduced. Then there are women agents of change, and they can act as agents of change, those self-help groups to start off with, and then that can be spread, basically. So among the two entry points, among cotton pickers and farming community in terms of the lives of farmers, I would prefer that latter would be easier to start off with, and maybe at a later stage, because there are issues with access to mobile phones over there also, because if the family has a phone, it's with the male farmer. But then again, we have to take them on board and allow the female to be using that phone in cases we're talking about really small livelihoods, by the way, small farmers. So that is an entry point, the livelihood section, and then maybe at a later stage we can move on to cotton pickers once we feel that they have access to phones and have enough transactions over an annual basis. So yeah.
Thank you so much for this. I think that's a completely valid point. So whenever we see issues of stories of financial inclusion from African countries, it's often the cell phone that is a major driver of that change. But in Pakistan, the women's ownership of cell phones is also quite far behind that of men. So that is one avenue that's not even available to us. And we have to look at other entry points. And you rightly mentioned about taking a livelihoods approach and also going through self-help groups. And that's also something that Karan Das is looking at when we're working with women in agriculture. So we're also identifying other activities that they're involved in, which they might be working as artisans, they might be employed in factories, in processing. So those are also the segments that we're focusing on.
And if I may add on to what Ramiz has been talking, if I may.
Yes,
So,
please.
according to the World Bank's FinTechs for 2021, only 21% of Pakistan's population is actually financially included. And, the global average is about 70% or so. And out of our bankable population, only 10% actually have formal bank accounts. So, just the statistics itself, let alone access to a smartphone or a cell phone, is something that poses a bigger challenge. Because once you are part of a financial system, only then will you be able to have access to a cell phone. I mean, be able to use that through a cell phone or whatever, tool that you like. But what we have evidenced in our, experience is that digitization of payments is not a means to an end. It's just one of the tools. So digitization of the value chains, digitization of the different processes within a value chain will then result in financial inclusion. So what we first need to be working on is maybe the traceability aspect of agricultural value chains. And then we will be able to move towards financial inclusion, particularly of the farmers.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for this. I think completely valid. Financial inclusion statistics are low. Within that, there's also a huge gender gap as well, which has been diminishing over the years, fortunately. But it's still there, it still persists. So those are things that we need to look into. And of course, once there's more digitization overall in rural areas, then we can hope to see more gains in women's financial inclusion as well. Mr. Umair is also back. Yeah, you were talking about monitoring. So any early findings from the monitoring results, and also what are the factors that are explaining the trends that you've seen? So are there any barriers that need to be addressed regarding financial institutions, or are there any areas in which other partners can intervene and take some of the load off the financial institutions?
Okay, so thank you, Amna, and my apologies because there are technical issues. Regarding monitoring, I just want to complete. Under this monitoring framework, we have a quarterly report from the bank. And in terms of account ownership, I would like to mention that we are achieving the targets that we have set under this, that we have 40 million payment active accounts by 2024. And for the 2022, we have a target of 25 million active women accounts. So we have around on 24.9 million. So we are almost achieved that target of account ownership. One point that Ms. Aisha have mentioned here, that the global FinTech data, I totally agree because FinTech is a global database that
Sir, do you want to try turning off the video and see if the audio works? Because we've lost you again.
collect based on the demand side survey. But can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but we keep on losing you in the middle. So you can turn off the video. Maybe that helps with the bandwidth.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of supply side data that we have collecting on based on the unique identifier, that is the national CNIC number. So we would like to share that we have 80 million unique bank depositors that have a bank account, and out of that we have 64 million are the active depositors. And in terms of, if we talking about female, out of the adult population, that is estimated around 135 million in Pakistan, and of which around 49% is female. We have around 42% of the adult female have a bank account. These are the supply side numbers, and that we have published now in our statistical bulletin. So in terms of account ownership, yes, we are progressing well, and we are targeting to reach the gender gap that is around 35% right now. But on the access to finance, yes, we understand there are challenges in terms of access to finance in terms of agriculture finance, either SME finance. So these are the challenges. And there may be some demand side issues or may supply side issues. But if you see, the main challenge in my view is the recognition and participation of women in the labor force. Because if you see the women in agriculture, can you hear me now? Amna, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. So in the labor force, if we see around women participation in the labor force is around 22%, and of this 67% is women that are live in agriculture sector. But when we see in terms of access to finance, it is quite low, which is around 16%. So there is a huge gap that we need to bridge. And one of the reasons for this gap is that because banks do not see women as a viable business segment for agriculture financing. And the reason is that because women are normally working in the informal sector, they are facilitating their family agri businesses in terms of farm activities and non-farm activities. But also they are working in the shadow of their male counterparts, so they are not recognized as a agripreneur to be a viable segment for the banks. Similarly, they have the documentation issues, they have the information issues to the products and services. Then they have collateral issues that have mentioned by Ms. Samina. So all these issues basically limit the financial inclusion of women in the agriculture sector. So and then on the supply side, if you see, there are the product issues in the product designing, there are issues in the marketing activities, there are issues in terms of financial literacy of the women. So what State Bank is doing, we are taking various initiatives. What is it? I have already mentioned the banking on equality policy. Then we have issued the electronic warehouse receipt financing scheme to facilitate those female who are actually do not have the collateral to give to the bank, so they can avail financing against their produce. Similarly, we have facilitating banks to improve value chain financing. So the different actors in different value chains that can be identified and that can be accessed for providing financial services. And similarly, we are providing various capacity building programs. We are doing farmer financial literacy program where we are providing basic financial information to these women. So at the last, I would like to mention that State Bank is committed to provide financial inclusion to women, and we are open for other stakeholders to sit together and we can identify the challenges that particularly women are facing in the agriculture sector, so we can work together to reach our maximum objective of universal financial inclusion in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you for all of those valuable points. And yeah, I think it's great to see State Bank introducing all of these useful initiatives around warehouse receipt financing, value chain financing, also emphasizing financial literacy to the banks. And what we've repeatedly seen is that the regulators are taking all of these positive steps, but the women remain unaware as well because they can't access information. So hopefully the banks can start to see them as a viable and profitable customer segment as well. Karandas is also setting up a portal for women where all of the relevant information is available to them in one place. And we do understand that it's going to be more useful for women who are either urban or literate. But the idea is that eventually this will be accessible to women in the rural areas with low literacy levels as well. And we hope to see a cascading down of that information to women who need it the most as well. So I go over to Madam Samina now. So, given your experience, so what sort of interventions do you think have the potential to address financial needs of women? Are there any channels to which we can offer products and services? And what sort of actors would be good candidates for serving as partners or as agents of change to provide these services to women? Ma'am, you're on mute.
So I think the colleagues that have spoken have given very good suggestions in terms of identifying the needs. I think someone mentioned financial literacy. I think that's a very important tool in terms of helping women. See, we have to understand that most of the women in rural areas, and I think to some extent, even rural men, are very intimidated by paperwork. You know, paperwork is something that they're not used to. Also, a lot of the requirements, what is it? Biometric again and again. Opening a bank account may sound very easy in a TV commercial, but in reality, opening a bank account is not so easy. So it takes a lot of visits, a lot of their transportation issues, there are other issues. So just opening a simple bank account has taken. Opening a business, you know, we encourage women to become agribusiness women, entrepreneurs. But, you know, to get all the paperwork done, we just help 2 small women enterprises get their NTN and, you know, GST and all that. And it was such a cumbersome process. So I think the processes needs to be simplified, or there should be some center to help the women. The state bank perhaps could have a rural women facilitation center, and instead of women run into the banks, perhaps the bankers can have a target that, you know, I know bankers have targets. We have to make so many customers. I live in Islamabad, and one of my neighbor's son would come and visit me every day. He had just started a bank job, and he said, "Auntie, I have this target. I have to make so many customers in this month." So maybe the state bank could give a target to its bankers and say, every month, you know, you have to make so many women, rural women farmers, your customers. And then it would be the bank running after the rural women to help them get an account open, as opposed to the women running after the bankers. So we have to, you know, think out of the box. We have to, you know, also see that the Agriculture Bank, Zarai Taraqqiyati Bank, Khushhali Bank, all those banks who say that our main beneficiaries are farmers and women farmers. I think we also have to change the language. We have to make our language gender sensitive. All the advertisements I have seen, all the notices I have seen, they always start with Kisan Bhaiyo. Kisan Bhaiyo. I mean, I have not seen Kisan Behno, honestly. Even the announcements, everything, it's always Kisan Bhaiyo. So if you're not going to recognize women as Kisan, and again, who is Kisan goes back to the land ownership. So is Kisan the man who holds the paper? Or is Kisan the woman who works 18 to 20 hours a day on the land and may not hold the paper in most cases? So I think that we also have to make a gender sensitive language and actually call women Kisan, Kashtkar, Kisan, and say it repeatedly so that people start using the term. We have to also ask the government to do it. Government Agriculture Department, I don't know about other provinces, but in Punjab, they issue a monthly magazine. It's called Zaraatnama. And it always starts with Kisan Bhaiyo, Kisan Bhaiyo. So language is important. If you're not addressing the woman, why would women come and ask you for help? Similarly, I think that we all understand that to start a business, even if you have to make a ketchup, or in Gilgit-Baltistan, they tell us that we have so much apricot and we have so much apple and it goes down to waste and animals eat it. In South Punjab, tomato is wasted. oranges are wasted, mango is wasted. So there's a lot of possibility of actually using cheap vegetables and things and make them byproducts. But all of them need a little machine. It could be 25,000, 50,000, but you got to start with the little machine. A lot of the times our women farmers make wonderful products, but their products are not ready because their packaging is very poor. And the little packaging machine that I have checked, starts with 35,000. So perhaps we could give women these, either give them the machines directly and then teach them how to use it, or give them these small loans to buy particular machines. When it comes to working in agriculture, most of the agriculture tools are designed for men. So the digging machine and the harvesting machine and the seed plantation, they are so heavy. And we had to search the whole market in Lahore, and only then we found a digging machine that a woman could handle. So machinery also needs to be designed for women, because the reality of our agriculture Pakistan is that boys have left the villages, men have left the villages. They all think that after they finish their high school, an office job is waiting for them in Islamabad or Lahore, and everybody wants to do a computer job to make quick money, or they go to the army, or they go to Dubai, or they go to another city and work as a chowkidar, a security guard. The villages are becoming empty of men everywhere. And most of the women, most of the agriculture, land, animals, families, they're being taken care by women. So we have to help the woman in the village to become empowered. And we should not expect that the woman will go to the bank and the woman will go to the loan scheme and the woman would go to the Nadra. I think everything has to go to the village. That should be the approach. And reach that woman who's sitting in the village. And she just doesn't have time to go and sit in offices. She's not going to do it. That's why customers are not, more women are not becoming customers. So there needs to be mobile vans of banks and organizations who want to help women to reach door to door and facilitate the rural women farmers. Thank you.
Thank you for these valuable ideas. First of all, I'm sorry, as you can see, my office has lost power and we're waiting for the backup to be restored. But I think you rightly pointed out that the language that is used is also very gendered, and that shows the bias of the people in power towards farmers. How do they see the farming household? So they do feel that it's the men who are making the decisions. So that needs to change. And you mentioned some areas where women can be helped. I'd also like to hear from Ms. Aisha Gulzar about solutions. And in light of your experiences, do you think there are interventions that can address financial inclusion for women? Are there any channels that can be provided? Are there partners that we can work with, that financial institutions can work with to reach out to women? And yeah, also I realize that we're a bit over time, so I'd be grateful if people can spare a few more minutes so that we can wrap up this important topic. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you, Anna. Ms. Samina has very rightly pointed out many important elements of why we don't see more women in the financial space in Pakistan. Having said that, one of the things that we have experienced is if we have to move towards collective agribusiness and aggregation. And we have to try to see that through this node of collective agribusiness, if we can try to use social capital as a means to be able to lend to women or to rural farmers, in different areas. The cost of capital, for example, for microfinance institutions and NBFCs has become so exorbitant. I mean, it's at the range of 40 percentage points plus minus 2 to 3. So, which farmer is going to be able to access that? not only to mention the cumbersome process of being able to access capital, even at that exorbitant rate. So like Ms. Meena said, how can we get the women delivery of service to the women at their doorstep? So the only thing that comes to mind is aggregation and collective agribusiness. And then again, when we are providing them access to this capital, access to finance, if we are just going to be making it open-ended, we don't know where it's going to be used. As we've seen, through a lot of microfinance institutes where capital could be taken for maybe a Kiryana store or tailoring or a beauty parlor, or maybe even for some agriculture related work, pickling, that kind of thing. But 40% of it is used maybe for that activity, whereas 60% is used to pay off other loans. So until and unless we peg that kind of capital to some sort of either input, or some sort of equipment or machinery, we will not be able to have full impact of that capital that we're putting out there in the agriculture sector. So we need, Quwwat is a fantastic program, where they provide interest-free loans. That is also an aspect that we need to look at, in Pakistan, particularly in the rural areas where interest does not go down well with the rural population. So how do we tackle that challenge as well? Can we look at some kind of revolving capital? Can we, to reach out to these rural farmers, rural men and women farmers, we have the local community organizations. So if I'm just to quote, one example from our own work, in Gilgit-Baltistan as well as in KP, we've formed groups of anywhere from 150 to 300 farmers. Some of these are purely women-led groups, women organized, women-led groups. Some of these are mixed, some of these are men-only groups. To be able to give them an entity, a legally registered entity, we tried to take them, to the SCCP as a business. That involved too many formalities and regulations, directors, chair capital, this, that, and the other. The next option was we tried to get them registered as an agribusiness cooperative. We were able to do that in GB, to some extent in KP. In Punjab, the cooperatives department does not work. They're held up by some case or the other through which they're unable to register any new cooperatives. So until, this group, which we would like to use as social collateral for lending in the future, and through our own programs, we have made it a success by lending them through 2 cycles of credit, which they're revolving themselves, lending out to the farmers, and then collecting themselves as well, and then repaying to the parent institution. This is something that we have seen happen, but again, that requires a lot of effort and will, all the way from the policy level down to the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you for this. I think several valid points mentioned, because of course you rightly said that interest is something that's looked down upon in the rural areas. So even if we are providing access, we still have to think about the kind of product as well that is being offered. And Quwwat is doing a great job, also have a lot of positive brand equity associated with them. Let's see how much can they scale up, but generally have a very good brand image in the market. And yeah, the same with, you also talked about cooperatives. So again, it has been a challenge to register new cooperatives. Otherwise, we've seen them grow in India, in Turkey, and they have been important agents of inclusion. But we've struggled with the regulations over here as well. But they're very useful because women do feel more comfortable discussing things, asking questions to each other when they're part of a group. And then it also gives them more negotiating power, bargaining power, vis-a-vis the middlemen, the contractors, the buyers, and the financial institutions as well. So a very useful tool that we see in practice in GB. Hopefully in future, we'll see that in the other parts of the country as well. We have some comments from the audience as well. We have one question, and I think Mr. Umair also wanted to respond to some of the points that came up during the discussion, because there was a question around increasing the number of branches or offering lower interest rates. And I think you have some opinion about the operating costs as well. So you can share that with the audience if you want. And then Also, there's a question from the audience regarding the fact that even if women do inherit land or they own property, then still the banking sector does not find them to be lucrative or attractive enough. So, sir, any comments on that?
Well, thank you, Amna. First of all, I would like to mention, as Samina mentioned, that there is an issue of how we can provide benefit to the women in terms of high cost of capital. I think digitalization of financial services is the future, and SBP is focusing on providing digital financial services in all segments, including agriculture finance. And we have given the license of 5 digital banks in recent past, and these digital banks basically provide end-to-end digital solutions to these segments, including agriculture. So it will help to reduce the bank's operational cost, and they will able to pass on the benefit to the customer in form of market reduction. Regarding your second part of your question, that the inherited land, I think there is no legal bar on and no regulatory compulsion from the banking side. So the women who have inherited property from their parents, they cannot give that land for offer this land as a collateral. So, but I think it's more a cultural or societal issue rather than a regulatory issue. And I think we want to work on this because, as I already mentioned, the recognition of the women as a farmer, as a loony or of a financial sector is very important. So we have to empower the women to so they can get the financing from a bank. Although we have also issued various schemes that allow women to get financing from the bank without collateral, and our credit refinance and credit guarantee scheme for women entrepreneurs that allow women financing at a subsidized rate as well as collateral-free lending. But it is not the future. I think we need to have such a change in our social fabric, in cultural values, so that women can participate in this in the financial system as their own. So they do not need to rely on their male counterparts to accessing financial services. So I think on this we all need to work together to bring this social change in our social fabric, so allow women to get financing from the form of financial services.
Wonderful. Thank you for this. Thank you to all of the panelists for the insightful comments as well. I think we heard a couple of useful solutions from different members, and we did suggestions for digitization as a tool for lowering operation costs, using social collateral, using cooperatives, using groups. Spreading awareness is essential, otherwise even useful policies would not be effective. And then also acknowledging women as farmers and addressing their particular needs in terms of the machines, inputs, markets that they need. So basically taking a different approach to the ecosystem as a whole. We also saw the need to involve men and to involve them as champions of change as well, to target the household. Finally, we also heard that you don't need to focus on just the women farmers and just the women laborers. We can also see the other activities that they're involved in, whether they're involved in the processing side, whether they're involved in selling other stuff, they're involved in art, they're working as artisans. So we can look at the different roles that they're performing and provide them tailored financial services. And if we broaden our lens, then that means that we also have greater choice of actors to work with. Sorry, there's this one last question from Ms. Abira in the audience. She's asking, what is the organic market and organic fertilizers value chain in Pakistan? Let me know if anybody wants to comment on that. It's not directly linked to financial services. Ms. Aisha?
Sure, I can try to answer that. So organic is used in a very broad context in Pakistan. If we are to look at the technical side of things, we actually don't have any organic certification for any product in Pakistan. In fact, we don't even have any authority or any evaluators who can conduct this kind of certification within Pakistan. The closest certification authority that we have is in Sri Lanka. So typically or generally or technically, we do not really have any organic market or product in Pakistan. Having said that, when I say that we use the term very broadly, so at a very small scale where natural manure is used or natural practices are used, we are marketing that as organic. So there is no proper value chain for that. We don't really have any manufacturer of organic fertilizers. However, I don't want to name any companies, but 1 or 2 companies are producing bio-fertilizer in Pakistan. So those could be accessed, but we don't really have any organic fertilizer or organic market in Pakistan. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you for this additional insight. So wherever people can't access fertilizers, inputs, etc., so that is organic in our country, basically. Thanks for this. And to sum up, I just briefly refer to a study Karan Das undertook recently. So we did a mapping of the different actors that are present in the ecosystem. And we, from north of the country to the south of the country, we mapped out which actors are working with women as farmers, women as workers in the factories, and then women as artisans or manufacturers of handicrafts as well. So we've been able to come up with a very interesting and broad list of entities. So there are farming groups up in GB. Then there are collectives of artisans in Sindh, for example, who are producing bangles, chunris, khusas, etc. Then there are date processors in Sindh and Balochistan. So that has given us quite a sizable database of entities that are working with women, and then also the number of women who are involved with these businesses is quite substantial. So we hope to share that with the financial services industry as well, and perhaps they can then offer their payments or their products as solutions to these women. So that's something that we'd be doing as a next step. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for the insights that you shared, and also thank you for staying overtime. I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope you found it useful too. So thank you, and I'll close the discussion here now.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you
Thank
for this
you.
great learning opportunity. Khudafez.
Thank you so much. It was nice to meet everyone and to learn from you. I look forward to keeping in touch.
Hopefully, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Khudafez.